Today we're going to talk about a grid drawing and how a grid drawing can help you. So if you look at this picture here that I've drawn, I want you to think of the different things that you might be able to point out as you draw. You can see shapes in there, we can see circles, and we can see a variety of different lines, thick and thin lines and angles. But one thing that is really helpful, especially as a beginning artist, is to use a grid. So I'm going to show you how that's done. By using a grid, you'll be able to look at just shapes instead of worrying about the entire object, and it will kind of help you train your brain to see just a small piece at a time. And so I put a grid on this, and I'm doing 8 across and 8 down. So what I'm going to do is take a T-square, and I'm going to draw a grid with 8 across and 8 down. I like to use a T-square because the crossbars here on this T-square, you can line up right with the edge of the paper, and so it's easier to make sure that your lines are vertical and horizontal instead of angled slightly. And I'm just using the width of the ruler to get mine in there. So mine will be a tiny bit bigger than the reference. If you wanted your picture to be bigger than your reference, say I wanted it to be half again the size of my reference, I could actually, if my reference picture is got a 1-inch grid on it, I could do a 1.5-inch grid. So we're going to go ahead and number it all the way down, 8 across, and you're going to have 8 rows. So we're going to go to number 64. And if you just check this last row and make sure it's in multiples of 8, you'll know that you haven't skipped a number accidentally. So now what we're going to do is we are going to look at our picture that we have here. And instead of looking at this pig as a whole object, we're going to just look in each square and see what is in each square and draw what we see there. So if you look here in square number 1, I've got just a few lines here. So if I go from this point to this point and decide about what's halfway, I can put a little tick mark halfway. I'm working in that same square. I'm going to put a little tick mark halfway. So that tells me that's about where this line is. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn my paper so it's easier to draw. So feel free to turn your paper however you need to, and then try to draw what you see just in that one square. And I'm going to just work my way up in order just to see if I can focus on the edges and the lines and the angles that I see in each square, and try not to think of it as an object right now. So right here you can see that I can put a little tick mark. Since my square is the same size as this, I can put a little tick mark about where it starts and about where it comes in. So it looks like it's a little, starts in a little bit here and then it goes down a little further on this end. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw that in. I can come back and add all my thicker lines as soon as I have it all in. Now on this one, obviously it continues from here, but it looks like it goes to about halfway up here. So I can put a tick mark there, and then I can curve and get my line there. I'm just going to go ahead and work around and show you how you can quickly get some accuracy in your drawing just by paying attention to where things are. So I'm not going to look at the tail per se, I'm just going to look at what's in box number 6. We want to look at the negative shapes, which is right through here, and we want to look at the shape right here, but not worry about it being a tail, just worry about the shapes that we actually see. So we're going to go ahead and draw that in, and we can see that it comes up like this. And then we've also got a little bit of a line right here. And then we're going to move on to the next one. I'm going to move this to this side so I can see a little bit easier. Feel free to turn your paper however you need, but make sure you're just making little tick marks and just paying attention to one square at a time. I'm going to go ahead and just keep working my way around. And I'm going to work my way down now instead of starting back at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and work my way down. This way I can see it comes over to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. And this crosses over that corner. So I'll draw that in. And then just so I can see where I'm at, I'm going to erase that number and start working this way. And it goes about 1/3 up. So there's my tick mark. I'll round it off and get that line in. And then work my way down. I've got number 14 and 13, there's nothing. It looks like we have a line about right here. And it goes over about halfway. There's my tick mark, so I'm going to get that halfway mark in there. And then I'm going to work down to 11. So we'll just continue down. And in 11, it looks like I have a curved line right there, and then I've got some lighter values going here. I'll come back and touch that up just a little bit once I've got the whole thing drawn. I'm going to work down to number 10 here. Now I can look here where I've drawn this line. It's a little too far over, so I need to adjust it. So be willing to adjust, make adjustments if you've gotten something just a little off. Just be willing to change it and adjust it. It's kind of, you're always drawing. Even if you put something down, it can be changed just to tweak it a little bit. If it makes a difference, go ahead and do that. I'm looking at the shapes that I see in here, just thinking of them as shapes. And now I'm going to go ahead and work up to the next row. So just go ahead and continue and go to each row and add the shapes that you see. So trying to pay attention to where the lines cross over. Any of your lines that you're drawing crosses over the grid line will help you get your drawing more accurate. So try to pay attention to that and try to stay focused in one area. As you can see, it's really tricky to not go over to the next line grid spot just when you're drawing a line, but try to stay within that grid. It's just a good way to start. Tick markers are always helpful as well. And I'm just lightly drawing in the basic shapes. What I'm going to do after is I'm going to go ahead and refine it and make my lines darker and add any shading I need to add and just tweak it however I need to as I go. But I'm going to try to focus on just the basic shapes I see first. But anyway, hopefully by looking at just the shapes in each square, you're looking at shapes instead of the object, which will help you start to notice shapes in everything and be able to see shapes within the objects that you're drawing. This one's a little trickier, and it looks like it's just past halfway. So I'm going to put a little tick mark there to help me get my lines in accurately. I'm looking at the space between here and here. I can see it's about there, and this needs to curve in a little bit. So I'm going to tweak that a little bit, and then I'm going to erase this line here and pull it out a little bit just to round it and make it fit. Those shapes fit in that grid. And that fits a lot better. This one's pretty easy because we know we're kind of connecting those lines. So we're going to go ahead and put those in and finish that up. And look at the shapes that we see. Where do they fit right within the grid? Try to get those in. Okay, so now we have basically the shapes. Now we're going to just add a little more quality to it by adding darker lines and defining it just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just darken my lines up. It's kind of a rough drawing, so I'm going to go ahead and darken my lines up and keep it nice and loose like it is in the drawing, but try to just define it a little bit more and where I have softer lines, I'll go ahead and hold my pencil further back and get those soft lines in. And just, we put the lines where we thought they were supposed to be, and now we're just darkening them and changing the quality so they match our reference drawing here. And we're going to add the shading that we need as well. Remember to get a light touch to your pencil, you just hold it further back. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I like that it's kind of loose and not kind of sketchy, not perfect and exact, but it's gives it some interest. You can do this on any picture. If you find a picture you've taken or a picture online or somewhere else, you can actually just you can just draw a grid right over the top of it, print it or whatever you need to do, and then draw the grid right over the top of it, and then draw a grid on your paper and see if you can make your picture more accurate just by focusing on each square one at a time. And then once you've done that a few times, you can start just going from one square to the next in whatever order you want. But just to train your brain to see the shapes within one area and to focus in one spot at a time, I like to try to do one square at a time to begin with, and then you can change that up however you want to. But you can see it's just getting a lot more interesting because we're adding some interest to the lines, kind of giving it that sketchy look and some dark values here and there, thickening some of the lines up and adding a little bit of shading just to give it a little bit of depth. I'm going to add a little shading here and there and make it more interesting. Looks like I forgot that side of the eyeball, so we're going to get that in. I like to go over everything at the end just to see if there's any things I've missed and to touch them up a little bit, make sure I've gotten, oh, I missed an entire eye on this one, so I guess we'll put that eye in. But I'm looking at just the negative space. I can see that my shape right here is a little off, so I'm going to go ahead and curve it down and then up and erase that line just to tweak it just a little bit. So there you have it. By using a grid, you're able to draw something that you might not have gotten your proportions quite right. So if you draw a grid on your paper and a grid on your reference picture and look at one square at a time, you're able to see shapes, you're able to see negative space, angles, and you'll notice things that you might not have noticed before. Please like and subscribe. If you would like to leave a comment with things that you would like to learn, I can add that in a future video. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you in the next video.